They need better play from Deshaun Watson. That's the bottom line. All right, it's the Breer Report for September the 10th. We have games to react to for the first time in almost 7 months. Week 1 is in the books. A great week of action. And we're going to start with our first topic here, which is sort of a big picture topic on where the NFL is going into the 2024 season with its very best teams. And I would say it wouldn't be a total shock. This never happens, but it wouldn't be a total shock if we see the 4 conference finalists right back there at the end of January. Again, chances are all 4 of them don't make it there. Injuries can happen, circumstances can arise for teams. But I think all 4 of those teams coming out of the weekend have a really nice shot to get to where they want to go. So I'm going to give you guys a quick look at each one of them. I think with the Niners coming off of Monday night, it's self-explanatory. That team didn't have to strain much to blow the Jets out of the building. They won by 2 touchdowns on paper, but that thing wasn't really close in the fourth quarter. They were able to control the pace of the game through the running game without Christian McCaffrey out there. Ricky Pearsall eventually should be added to the receiver group, which looked really good with Brandon Ayuk having no training camp. Deebo Samuel, you heard about how he was in shape all summer. That showed up. The defensive line looked dominant. Nick Bosa looked really good. It right now looks like a team that does not have any holes. I picked them to win the Super Bowl. I feel pretty good about that one. I'll say that. I feel pretty good about that one. The team they played in the NFC title game, the team they beat in the NFC title game, looked equally good on Sunday night, playing against the Los Angeles Rams with Matthew Stafford coming home to Detroit again. And what was most impressive about the Lions to me was what we saw at the lines of scrimmage, sort of similar to what we saw from San Francisco on Monday night. We saw a dominant defensive line, and Aiden Hutchinson looks like he's taking another step as a player. Were they perfect on defense? No. Matthew Stafford threw for over 300 yards, but the secondary will improve over time with some of the young guys. Terrion Arnold, their first-round pick, and it's Racecraw, their second-round pick, primary among them. That secondary should get better over time. And then more than anything else, how they closed that game out against the Rams on an 8-play drive. They start with the end around, and then after the end around, it is running the ball right down Main Street, right at a pretty good Rams defense. It doesn't have Aaron Donald anymore, but still a pretty good group, running it right down their throat and leaving no doubt. They saddled up behind David Montgomery outside of a swing pass. It was all runs between the tackles, and they were able to just chew a worn-out Rams defense out. You see the identity of the Lions coming up again. And I like one of the most impressive things about where the Lions are right now is when Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell showed up there 3.5 years ago, they told you what they were going to build, and they've built exactly that. And you saw it in overtime. An impressive finish to the game for the Detroit Lions. That's an impressive team. We saw, again, some of their young players flash. Terrion Arnold flash. Jameson Williams looks like the guy from Alabama from a couple of years ago suddenly. So that team also has a chance to be better than it was a year ago. Now, over in the AFC, the 2 teams that played in the conference championship game played in week 1. And I think both of them looked pretty good on Thursday night. Both of them have a chance to get better. We talked about this in the Breer Report on Friday. We got a glimpse of what that Chiefs offense is going to be. Over the last couple of years, they got bigger and a little slower at the receiver spots in response to the way the defenses were playing them with a lot of those too high coverages. Well, this offseason, they've gone back and tried to lean into having big play threats in their offense and getting the ball downfield. And it's something Patrick Mahomes has really worked on. They sign Hollywood Brown. They draft Xavier Worthy at the bottom of the first round. They move up to go and get Xavier Worthy. And ultimately, the vision is for those 2 guys on the outside to take the top off the defense, and then you're going to have Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce running in these big open spaces underneath. Because of Brown's injury, because Worthy is still new, we didn't get to see the full scope of that in the opener. But with what we saw from Worthy, we got to see a little bit of what it's going to look like. And so when Brown gets in there, when Worthy gets his feet underneath him, the Chiefs are going to be even better. Still some questions on defense and how they replace L'Jarius Sneed, but they look pretty good defensively as well. The Chiefs are on their way. Hard to see where they wouldn't be in a seventh straight conference title game, health permitting, at the end of January. And then Baltimore, I'll just say this. They have gone through a lot of changes this offseason. The defense doesn't have Jadeveon Clowney anymore, doesn't have Patrick Queen anymore. On offense, they're replacing 60% of their offensive line. Those things are going to get better. They're going to, they hope, get more out of their young edge rushers, guys like Adafe Owe and David Ojabo. And then on the offensive line, you saw the issues, right? We had the penalties, of course, and it's going to just take some time for them to get their feet underneath them. And so what they've done here, and this is part of the deal, they've banked on their ability to draft and develop. So they trade Morgan Moses, they let John Simpson go, they let Kevin Zeitler go, and they've got three guys who are essentially first-time starters in there. It was always going to look a little sideways at the start. It was always going to take time for that group to come together around Tyler Linderbaum, their center, and Ronnie Stanley, their left tackle. So for Daniel Falele and for Andrew Voorhees and for their rookie right tackle, Roger Rosengarten, it's just going to take time for that to come together. Once it comes together, I think you will see, you get a better view of what they're going to be offensively. And I think you already saw some of the progress that Lamar Jackson has made, in particular with two of his young skill guys who he worked with a lot this offseason in Zay Flowers and Isaiah Legley. So I think all four of those teams, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Lions, the Niners, the last four teams standing, have as good a chance as any to be standing at the end and have a really good chance to improve. Okay, our second topic is what's happening in the state of Ohio, my old home state. And I think if you look at the two teams there, both those teams had a right to think we could wind up in the Super Bowl this year. And maybe it's more of a stretch for one than the other, but you look at where the Bengals are, right? And they were in the Super Bowl after the 21 season. They made the conference championship game after the 22 season. And last year was the year Joe Burrow gets hurt, and they're still pretty good. So starting with them, they need to get Jamar Chase done, and they can't wait till after the season. And there's just something that looks sideways and discombobulated about their performance. I know they're better than that. And yes, they have some moving pieces on defense. There's no DJ Reader there anymore. He was, of course, hurt to end last year. They are bringing veteran safeties back, and having Von Bell back in the middle of the defense should help long term. But there is I think there is some learning going on as far as all those guys playing together. And then offensively, like clearly it looked like they missed Joe Mixon. And based on how Joe Mixon played in Houston, clearly it looked like they missed Joe Mixon. But that was going to take a little time with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. It I want I what you want to see from that team is how that team is playing together and how they're playing for each other and the intensity. And it just looked to me on Sunday like that Patriot team really brought it, and the Bengals didn't really answer. So what do we see in week two? I think taking care of one of your best players and one of your best workers and one of your best big time performers, the guy who comes up biggest in the biggest moments, I think could signal to the team, we're in it with you. T. Higgins is playing out the year on his franchise tag. And that can lead to some things as far as the guy taking care of himself and everything else. You've accepted that. It's going to be impossible to keep both T. Higgins and Jamar Chase long term. Ostensibly, the Bengals have made their choice to keep Jamar Chase long term. Take care of him now. If you take care of him now, you'll save some money over what it would cost next year, and you'll signal to your locker room your commitment to the core that's in place right now. The guys who are going to be around long term. Your Joe Burrows. I think your Amarius Mims on the offensive line. I think he's a long-term piece. Jamar Chase on defense, guys like Logan Wilson, who they've invested in long term. Send a signal to your core. We're in it with you. I think you can do something to turn this pretty quick because that is still a really talented team. And as for the other team in Ohio, the Browns made it to the playoffs last year. They won 11 games last year with 5 different quarterbacks. They clearly have a really good core group that they've rewarded, guys who are in the primes of their careers. I think it's fair to ask these questions about Deshaun Watson now. He lost a lot of that first year, 2022, to the suspension, lost a lot of last year to injuries. They've tried to do things to make it work, to make him look more comfortable. going from 22 to 23, they made some changes scheme-wise with their existing offensive coordinator and Alex Van Pelt to try to get him playing faster. Didn't really work. And despite having the success they had in offense with all those different quarterbacks, they made a change in the offensive coordinator position in large part to try to build something that would fit for Deshaun Watson, that would evolve the offense for Deshaun Watson. So they bring in Ken Dorsey from Buffalo. Ken Dorsey, of course, coached there for Brian Daboll, who has Patriot background, and Deshaun Watson came up in that offense playing for Bill O'Brien in Houston. So you've done all these different things to try to make him more comfortable. You're playing out of the shotgun more. You're doing more to play with tempo. You've introduced all these different elements to the other 10 guys in the huddle to try to get the most out of your quarterback. Deshaun Watson has to play better. And yes, there are reasons why it didn't happen this week. Nick Chubb still isn't back in the lineup. You have Jerome Ford at running back. Your tackle situation, where it was last year at the end of the year, you're still sort of there because Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin didn't play on Sunday. These are things that will or should at least improve over time. You're breaking in Jerry Jeudy as a new receiver there. They need better play from Deshaun Watson. That's the bottom line. And he needs to be playing with more confidence. He needs to be processing what's in front of him better. He needs to play the smart, confident game that he was playing in Houston. And it's confounding to a lot of people who were with him in Houston, who look at it and say, this was a guy who was in the building at 6 a.m., who was a leader for the team, who everyone followed, who played a smart game, who made the right decisions, who could process when we gave him the offense that fit him best. The Browns need to see that player again because that player wasn't out there on Sunday against the Cowboys. And because of his contract, this sets up much different. They can't dump him the way Denver dumped Russell Wilson because his money is fully guaranteed, not only in 2025, but also in 2026. So it certainly feels like we've come to a fork in the road with Deshaun Watson. Do not draw sweeping complete conclusions over week one. It's not smart to do that. We've got a million examples of it, but the early signs weren't great, and the Browns need to find a way to get more out of him, but it's also on Deshaun himself. Finally, our third topic for week one, coming out of week one. Jets fans, don't worry. You played an absolute freight train of a team on Monday night. I think the best team in football. And to me, I think there were a couple of reasons why Jets fans should come out of that game feeling okay. Right. Number one, we saw what Aaron Rodgers is going to bring to the offense. What he did in that first touchdown drive and getting the ball to Garrett Wilson, the seam throw he made to Allen Lazard for the touchdown later in the game. We saw what that offense is going to become with Aaron Rodgers as the trigger man. So because the Niners are the team they are, they were able to control the pace and the tempo of the game through the lines of scrimmage. And it made it more difficult on the Jets because the score got away from them a little bit. Maybe they had to go away from the running game a little more than they would have liked to, and they weren't able to feature Breece Hall quite as much as they'd like to. Those things aren't going to keep happening. They're gonna the competition is gonna level off going forward. They play Tennessee on Sunday, then they play the Patriots the following Thursday. I think they'll come out of that stretch 2-1. Seeing what you saw from Aaron Rodgers, I think the reason for encouragement. And then where the Niners won that game was on the lines of scrimmage. The Niners have been great, both from a coaching standpoint and a personnel standpoint, both on the offensive line with Chris Foerster and his group, and on the defensive line with Chris Kasarik and his group. That's not going to look that way every week. The Jets have put together an offensive line that I think has a chance to be really good. And they have a defensive line that goes 7 deep with former first-round picks. I think eventually they'll get Hassan Reddick back in there. The Jets are not going to get beat on the lines of scrimmage the way that they got it beat on Monday night. So, again, you saw the flashes from Aaron Rodgers, and the lines of scrimmage are not going to look going forward the way that they looked in week one. Again, against who I think is the very best team in the league. That is the Breer Report for week one. We will be right back at you to look forward to week two on Friday from Miami.